On February 15, 1996, a Chinese rocket carrying a $200 million American satellite veered off course and exploded into a supposedly abandoned village 22 seconds after launch. When American engineers reached the crash site, military trucks were already hauling everything away. The satellite's encryption boards, containing classified guidance technology, were never found. Chinese officials claimed the boards, which took America 40 years to perfect, had, quote, vaporized on impact. However, only 18 months later, Beijing's once rudimentary missile tests became suspiciously precise. Following the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, in which the shuttle exploded 73 seconds after liftoff on January 28, 1986, taking the lives of all crew members, including a schoolteacher, the Reagan administration prohibited all commercial payloads from launching on the space shuttle. When other existing launchers, such as the American-made Atlas and Delta, as well as Europe's Ariane rockets, became too expensive and slow to schedule, this left numerous companies without a reliable means of placing their payloads into orbit. By the late 1980s, a new and rising player entered the space launch business: China. Determined to succeed in this profitable yet competitive market, China offered the Westerners its Long March rocket family at a price they simply could not refuse. In their terms, an American company would sign a contract, send a team of engineers to oversee integration at their remote airbase, and leave all rocket handling and launching operations to the Chinese, with the company workers observing and taking notes. In 1988, the United States signed a technology safeguards agreement with China, agreeing to the deal only if sensitive components of their satellites, such as encryption systems and guidance modules, remain protected. The deal imposed strict controls to comply with the international traffic in arms regulations. By the time the new decade came along, companies like Hughes, Motorola, and Space Systems Laurel had multi-million-dollar programs with their newest and unlikely business partner, and crates of materials began arriving at the Xichang Satellite Launch Center. Located deep in the mountains of the southwestern Sichuan province, the facilities were surrounded by ridges, pine forests, farmland, and a scattering of villages. This location was no coincidence, as Chinese planners believed it would be harder for foreign powers to spy on or sabotage launches. However, this also meant that, unlike Cape Canaveral or French Guiana, rockets launched from Xichang have no choice but to fly over land, over villages that, according to the government at least, were entirely uninhabited. In 1990, China launched Asiasat-1 aboard a Long March 3, marking the nation's first commercial mission for a foreign client. Soon, all kinds of weather and regional telecommunications platforms were taking off from the site, and the Xichang Satellite Launch Center quickly earned a reputation for getting the job done at half the price. However, despite its global clients, the launch center still felt closer to a military outpost than a modern aerospace facility. According to foreign engineers who visited the base, the air felt secretive and tense, the infrastructure was barely adequate, with outdated equipment, and most importantly, the launch pad showed clear signs of wear. Within the same compound, there was a newly renovated hotel to accommodate visiting Americans, leaving them with minimal access to the outside world. Behind the successful launches, the base was far from the image of an open and multicultural commercial gateway. As more and more foreign-built satellites arrived, so did the warning signs. In December 1992, a Long March 2E rocket carrying Australia's Optus B2 satellite lifted off from Xichang, only to suffer catastrophic failure 45 seconds later. The payload fairing collapsed under aerodynamic pressure, crushing the satellite inside its protective shell. Though the rocket limped into orbit with its mangled cargo, the satellite was beyond saving. 2 years later, another Long March 2E, carrying Apstar 2, exploded not even a minute into its launch for the exact same reason, this time raining debris into nearby areas, scarcely populated, causing several casualties. Despite having 2 significant incidents under their belt, the program didn't stop. The pad was repaired, and the launches continued. Just over a year later, on a cold February night, another satellite stood ready for launch. Early in the morning of February 15, 1996, Chinese workers finalized the preparations for the launch of Intelsat 708. The product of years of licensing, export negotiations, and careful engineering by Space Systems Laurel, The commercial communications satellite was designed to provide telephone, television, and data services across Asia, the Pacific, and parts of Africa. It was set to be launched into space by a brand new rocket, the Long March 3B. With more thrust and additional boosters, it was the most powerful rocket China had ever built. As such, this was a high-profile mission. Dozens of American engineers boarded vans and headed to the satellite processing building. According to engineer Bruce Campbell, quote, "Everybody was dressed in his or her best clothes. It was a party atmosphere." While the departure was initially slated for 2:51 a.m. local time, it was ultimately pushed back by 9 minutes, as the number 3 was considered a much luckier number by the superstitious locals. As the countdown began, on the other side of the world, at Laurel's Californian headquarters, even more people watched the live feed broadcast from the pad. At exactly 3:01 a.m., the launch began. The swing arms of the umbilical tower retracted, disconnecting the rocket from its support systems. Then the engines ignited, and the 426-ton Long March 3B slowly lifted off the pad. For the first 2 seconds, it rose straight and steady, just as planned. Suddenly, the vehicle shifted slightly, then more sharply, pitching east in a slow and unnatural arc. While it cleared the top of the tower, by the time it reached 160 feet, instead of climbing, it was completely turning sideways, drifting toward the edge of the base, and beyond that, a village. After flying for 22 seconds, low and fast, engines burning, skimming the treetops in the direction of the hotel and residential complex, the 426-ton vehicle crashed and slammed into a hill just beyond the launch center's perimeter. Upon impact, everything, from the payload, the propellant, and all the broken stages of the rocket, exploded, causing a massive plume of flame and oxidizer to burst skyward, lighting up the valley like daylight. Back at the satellite processing building, according to Bruce Campbell, quote, "Many things happened at once. I heard the biggest explosion of my life. I turned and started to run. Heard a smaller and then a larger boom. I left the ground. I was on the ground, scrambling, wondering why I was down there. I heard glass breaking and stuff was flying everywhere. For a moment, everything stopped. Then the lights went out. By then, hundreds of People's Liberation Army personnel were hard at work, ready to sweep every hint of destruction under the rug." When the shaken Americans were told that a bus would soon arrive to transport them back to Xichang, it was delayed time and time again. Suspecting this was so Chinese authorities had time to clean up the crash site, Bruce Campbell and another one of his colleagues put on masks, got on their bicycles, and taking advantage of the road going down into the valley, raced past the armed Chinese guard. At the impact site, they could see several craters that tore deep into the mountain, the resulting dirt and rocks even burying the railway line below. Strangely, Campbell and his friend did not see human casualties, only groups of soldiers and dozens of flatbed trucks and ambulances. When the Western engineers finally arrived by sunrise, as they headed back to their hotel, located just 200 feet to the east of the epicenter, the men could see that practically every door and window had been destroyed. Peculiarly, a clock in the lobby was still hanging, stopped just past 3 a.m. 2 weeks after the accident, China's official news agency reported that the Intelsat 708 incident had taken 6 lives and left 57 people injured, all from the nearby village of Mayelin, where the satellite and rocket crash landed. The town had fewer than 1,000 residents at the time of the incident, all of whom were well-versed in evacuation protocols. Although officials later blamed the failure on an unexpected gust of wind, footage from an Israeli engineer who filmed the devastation across Mayelin, as well as a later video of the failed takeoff from a Laurel employee, told a completely different story. After the footage became public in 2019, the video has since gone viral. Following the event, all the contracts were canceled. America reclassified satellites as military tech, and Laurel was fined $20 million for violating export controls. While initial Defense Department reports claimed the encryption gear had been recovered, the most sensitive components, the FAC-3R circuit boards, were never found. Mounted near the hydrazine tanks, Chinese officials insisted they were vaporized in the blast. But over the following years, China's missile guidance systems, once plagued by accuracy problems, steadily improved. Some analysts believed the post-crash review exposed them to diagnostic tools and software techniques they had not yet developed on their own. Within a decade, China was building faster, more precise, and more capable missiles. And this may very well be because of the Intelsat 708 disaster.